Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors webinar series. The theme for this week's webinar series is what research can you do in your pre-investment stage to secure your future China investment. On day one, we looked at the importance of creating a business plan and researching how you can develop your business scope and researching what Chinese name would be most suitable for your business. In yesterday's session, we were looking at the importance of creating a budget, maintaining that budget, and consistently updating that budget for your China investment so that ultimately you're going into the market with the right registered capital. Today, we're going to be looking at how to choose the right registered office address for your China investment. Now, I would just want to explain a little bit just by simply this webinar series, how people don't place any value in today's topic. I have the least amount of registrants for today's topic, which I find fascinating because it just shows to me how people are not placing any value on one, where they want to locate in China, which is an enormous country. Two, what do they need to know when they lease an office space, lease a factory space, etc.? What research can they do prior to investing in terms of finding the right location, finding the right office? But ultimately, the main purpose of today's presentation is to show you the importance of legal and tax consequences around your office address, which is probably what is so different in the Chinese market compared to any other jurisdiction in the world. And just by the lack of registrants and the lack of people attending today's presentation, it just shows me people don't realize how much value they need to place on this topic. So those that have shown up today, thumbs up, well done. I'm happy you're here, and I hope that you'll learn something today. Before we begin today's presentation, though, I just like to start off with a few admin points. If you are in any jurisdiction where you may have firewall difficulties, like sitting in mainland China, then please do switch on your VPNs. That will allow you to have much better stability in terms of internet line, Wi-Fi line, and audio. So definitely I recommend using a VPN. When you went into the system, you should have been able to choose what audio option you want. You can choose computer, mic, and speakers, or use your landline or mobile. You're going to have to pay if you use your landline or mobile versus using your computer, so I definitely recommend everyone going that route. However, if you're not using a VPN and you're incurring difficulties, please do switch then to the landline. If you are planning on using a landline or mobile, click the telephone option. You'll receive a number for the jurisdiction in which you're located in with an access code and an audio PIN, and then you'll switch on to using that landline or mobile. As is with every webinar I do, I try to leave room for about a 10 to 20 minute Q&A session. If I don't speak that long, we'll try to manage that again today. Please don't be shy. This is a complimentary webinar for all of you. Take the opportunity to ask your questions, insert them into the question section. If you even want to put some comments in, I'm happy to hear your comments. I will give priority to those people that ask questions in their registration forms based around the topic, and then I'll go on to questions from the audience today. So don't be shy, add the questions inside. Now, to make sure you guys are all listening to me, if you could kindly click on the hand button in your control panel. That will, first of all, allow me to know that you can hear me, that there aren't any technical issues. And second, if you could once again click on the hand button, that will remove the hand signal, and I'll know you're still listening on to me. Those of you that have not been able to join our webinar series in the past, please allow me just to take a few moments to introduce who we are. Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is specialized purely in inbound investment into China and Hong Kong. We establish, manage, and administer companies in both jurisdictions to meet client-specific requirements. And I can tell you now, there is no client that has the same business model and the same approach to their corporate services needs. We help clients from the get-go, meaning from pre-investment advisory, like the theme for this week's webinar series, all the way to ongoing compliance, accounting, tax, and human resource. As part of the pre-investment advisory, we also help with cross-border investment, tax optimization, and corporate restructurings if needed. Our clients are all international firms that are looking to expand in the Asian market, specifically into China and Hong Kong. And our clients range from doing a variety of things. Some are looking to manufacture in China, some are looking to purely trade by either sourcing or selling into the market. And then we have clients that are also in the services and professional services sectors. Just a minor disclaimer, the presentation for today is to provide all of you with a general view of the importance of choosing your registered office address. Some of you may have extremely specific questions based on your own experience, based on your own needs. I'm offering free consultations. Take me up on the offer, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to have an advisory session with you. Allow me to explain who I am. My name is Kristina Koehler-Coluccia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I've been dealing with the Chinese market since 2003, helping foreign investors with not only their market entry, but also their expansion within the Chinese territory. Now, I usually, in my bio speech, like to kind of explain what I've learned from being in the Chinese market. I'm going to make it very concise. What did I learn with 15 years of living from a personal perspective and also working in Shanghai? The three main things that highlight me is the first, that I've learned to have a great deal of patience. You go into the Chinese market, the culture strikes you from day one. It is so different from the Western world on a personal level and also on a work level. The Chinese tend to like to play off on Westerners' lack of patience, which we all have to face it. We don't have much of it, especially when it comes to being efficient and doing things quickly. So I had to learn to be patient very, very fast. It took me a number of years, but eventually I got there. And this is something that I would ask any of you to also learn when you're doing business in the market. The second is having an eye on detail. And if you participated on Monday and Tuesday's webinar sessions, you'll realize why I'm emphasizing the eye on detail. You go into the market, you've got to do market research. It has to be detailed. You're looking at finance aspects of your China business. It has to be detailed. Because everything is still relatively old-fashioned in terms of things not being computerized and things having to be done on paper, you have to watch out for all of the minor details when you're signing contracts, when you're dealing with just your own organization within your own personal life and work life. And probably the third thing that I would highlight is the following. Although these webinars are aimed at guiding you and providing you with tips on how to operate in the Chinese market, there is no company that has entered China that has had a smooth sailing. You will always encounter obstacles. And it is common in the Western culture to always find someone to blame for it. Oh my God, this has happened. Who am I now? You're going to actually spend time looking for the person who made the mistake, or you're going to find time blaming. You don't have time like that in China. And I learned this because I had this trait as well. You really need to find, before even considering who to blame, find the loophole. Find a way to get around that obstacle. And trust me, in China, there's always ways to get around the system. So, don't focus so much on Western traits that you might have. Learn to change yourself to how the Chinese behave, because really that will guide you in understanding the culture, understanding how you can manage and operate your business as well as your staff. The whole point of the webinar series and each individual webinar is really more that I can educate, inspire, and inform you on how to do business successfully in China. And I hope that I will be able to do that by the end of today's session. So the agenda, I've listed that here. This is kind of a summary of all the points we're going to be looking at. Again, a lot of information. And again, this is something I want to emphasize. I have the least amount of registrants for today's topic, the least amount of attendees, but you can see how, just by the agenda, how many points I have to go through to explain to you how to find the right registered office address for your business. And people don't realize the importance behind that. So I want to start off with today's presentation by looking at the 10 key points when choosing a location. And these 10 key points can be used for any jurisdiction anywhere in the world that you're looking to expand into. But I'm going to relate them into, what you have to look at when going into China. So the first is looking at your own style of operation. So I'm in the professional services sector. When I started out in China 15 years ago, I decided to start off in a business center, and it had to be a high profile, elegant image type of business center, because that is what I wanted to portray about my business. But if your operation is more marketing, PR, then maybe your wish is to start off in a co-working space like WeWork or Naked Hub. Or you're looking to go straight in, full-blown, into having a commercial space which you're going to renovate into your own unique style. So the first thing is, think about your style of operation, and that will kind of guide you in what type of structure you're looking to garner. The second is obviously demographics. And in China, being as large as it is, having multiple religions, multiple dialects, this is a key aspect. And there are two important angles that you have to look at when looking at demographics. The first is considering who your customers are, how important their proximity is to your location. If you feel that you are going to be selling a high-end luxury product, then you've got to look at where the majority of the wealth is sitting in China. And usually that's on the east coast of mainland China. For a retailer and some service providers, this is really critical. For other types of businesses, it really may not be that important. When you create your business plan, you should also be highlighting your target market. That's the whole point of the business plan, is highlighting your target market so that you can then analyze where these people are located in mainland China. The second is taking a look at the community. So if your customer base is local, does a sufficient percentage of that population match your customer profile to support your business? Does the community have a stable economic base that will provide a healthy environment for your business? And you've got to be very cautious when considering communities. And I say this particularly for people that are in the manufacturing sector. You will probably find industrial zones that are specific to your industry or your sector. But if at any point there is a downturn, then potentially, you will be affected by that downturn because everyone is in that area. So be wary of that. You've also got to think about your workforce when you're looking at the demographics. What skills do you need? And are people who have those talents readily available in that community? When the free trade zone was initially opened in 2013, this was only in the Waigaoqiao area, which is close to the airport and the coast of Shanghai. It's about an hour and 20-minute drive from downtown Shanghai. People were all like, oh, the incentives there are amazing, without really investigating it. And we want to be located there. Without even thinking, will there be people we can hire there? There were professional service firms locating there. Nobody was willing to do a commute of an hour and 20 minutes one way. So then people realized, okay, we've got to move out. We've got to go to the downtown. That's where our demographic is for people. So you've got to think about all of this when choosing your location. The next is foot traffic, and obviously this is really critical for people that are looking to set up retail facilities. I had one client about 12 years ago that was looking to set up it was an Italian company, looking to set up a gelateria in Shanghai. They chose Zhongshan Park in Shanghai as their main area. They went into a mall, and rather than negotiating and potentially choosing another location, they were so fixed on this mall that they ended up being on the 3rd floor where there was no foot traffic at all. All the foot traffic is usually on the 1st floor, and you find most restaurants located there as well. Within 3 months, they exited their business from the Chinese market. You've also got to look at accessibility and parking. Like I mentioned earlier, do you want your staff to do an hour and 20-minute commute one way? Or do you want to be in an area where people are just live around the corner and can go to your office and go to your facility? If people do have to drive, are there parking facilities available for your staff? In China, the biggest issue is bicycles. Most people travel to work on bikes. Are there enough biking facilities within your commercial building, factory space, etc.? Looking at the competition, again, this is part of your business plan and part of your market research. Are competing companies located nearby? Sometimes this is good because, you can take off the overflow that some competitors can't handle. You encompass that business. But sometimes it can be extremely difficult to be near your competitors because obviously then your marketing is a little bit tougher. And again, this is very different if you're manufacturing, if you're in retail. Point 6 is proximity to other business and services. I think this is extremely important for people that are in the retail sector, professional services, or even just commercial services. Are there restaurants around? How is the transportation system? Is there a metro? Are there bus lines? Looking at all these aspects for your staff are also quite critical. The next is looking at the image and the history of the site. Now, there are a lot of buildings in Shanghai, for example, that are designated as being historical sites. And a lot of professional service firms want to be located there because it's kind of a good image sign. The issue behind this is that these buildings are not properly maintained. And if they are of a certain age, you might not have heating, you might not have air conditioning. So you definitely have to look at those aspects. The next is regulations. Now, this is pertinent especially to manufacturing companies and trading companies. You will want to see if certain industrial zones or any other type of zones have preferential policies, incentives to attract you. The biggest thing about looking at regulations associated with your registered office address is don't take verbal confirmations as written confirmations. Verbal confirmations mean absolutely nothing in China. And I've had many a client choose locations because they've been promised reduced profits tax rates, they've been promised rental-free periods, etc. But all verbal, nothing in writing. You need to get these preferential treatments and incentives on paper. The minute you don't have it on paper, they are not preferential treatments or incentives. The next is obviously looking at the building's infrastructure. So even if you are in a brand new constructed building, make sure that you have all the necessary infrastructure to accommodate your business. And the last point is something I highlighted in yesterday's webinar. So you can kind of see how everything is linked together, is that obviously rent and management fees compose the majority of any type of facility expense. But you also have to look at the utilities. And the best is to either ask your real estate agent to help you find out those costs, or just ask, as an example, the previous tenant that was located here, could we see what their annual bill was for air conditioning, for gas, for whatever it might be, so that you kind of have an understanding of how much this is all going to cost you. Now, let's look at what's available to you in the market in terms of locations. You have the new free trade zones, and I mean, there are on a weekly basis articles that are being issued about these free trade zones. So let me explain what these new free trade zones. It's not that new anymore. It is 5 years old, but I'll explain what it all meant. So in 2013, the State Council mapped out plans to implement a series of negative lists for market access. And this was part of the government's efforts to establish a more open, competitive, and well-regulated China market. And this was first tried and tested in Shanghai in what they then called the new free trade zone. And this was 4 areas in Shanghai close to the airport. It included the airport. It also included the Waigaoqiao free trade zone, the bonded zone, the airport, and the port. And then it got expanded slowly to include Tianjin, Fujian, Guangdong, and basically now, there are about 14 or even, 20 of these new free trade zones throughout China. The issue with these free trade zones today, and I'm talking about July 2018, is that many of the preferential policies that were issued in 2013 have now been rolled out to the rest of the country. So actually the advantages of these new free trade zones are quite limiting and need to be more explored in depth based on the company's business model and whether that location suits them or not. In Shanghai, for example, the free trade zone has now expanded to the Lujiazui area, which is the banking district, or quite frankly, the Pudong area. So it's a much larger territory where you can establish your business. But, don't establish your business there if you don't understand what advantages that zone is actually going to bring you. If you feel that, for example, the Puxi area is much more of a marketing location for you, analyze that. See whether that fits what you want. Now, a lot of people nowadays are obviously not talking about manufacturing in China. It is still a big part of its industry. But, there's news going about, daily as well that a lot of manufacturing companies are moving away from China into Southeast Asia. This doesn't mean that there are no manufacturing companies that are establishing themselves in China. There still are. And you've got to understand where you need to be located if you are manufacturing. So I've highlighted here 5 cities and 1 region, but I'll explain with each of those cities how it does become a region. Shanghai is probably one of the most economic centers in China today. Beijing, for me, is more political than actually economic. In Shanghai, you are looking at a very large area that encompasses Jiangsu and Zhejiang province, where you're looking at companies that are establishing maybe 45-minute drive to a 1-hour drive away from Shanghai downtown to establish their manufacturing facilities. This then expands even further into deeper Zhejiang, Jiangsu in terms of Ningbo, Hangzhou, Wuxi, Wuhan, etc. But that whole area probably is one of the key manufacturing places in China. Each of the cities will have certain products that it focuses on, so you have to keep that in mind. Hangzhou, for example, because of Alibaba, is one of the main e-commerce locations, especially if you're working with Alibaba. The next is looking then at Beijing and its surrounding area, again, its territory. I don't include Tianjin as part of Beijing, even though it is only a 30-minute high-speed rail ride away. And again, you've got to look at the different products that are located in each of those areas. And then obviously you have the south. You have Guangzhou and Shenzhen that are also manufacturing hubs, particularly for consumer products. There's a funny phrase saying that in this area you can find manufacturing facilities all the way from toothpicks to automobile parts. It ranges dramatically when you're looking at the south. And then obviously you've got the Go West campaign, which is an incentive-focused program pushing foreign investors to manufacture in the undeveloped western regions of China. So again, there are numerous provinces under the Go West campaign that encompass that. Now, in each of these different campaigns, there are incentives that are offered in terms of free rent, in terms of lower profit tax rates. It's just that this needs to be investigated. So, work with a real estate agent to guide you and help you to create maybe even a location study to find out what are the best locations for you. Let's start off today with now the legal considerations. And this is really, for me, a hot topic. The legal and tax considerations is where I feel a lot of companies get messed up with. So I'm starting each page with just one point. So I'm going to make it very easy for you to understand why this is so important. A registered office address is needed for any type of company registration. And it needs to match your business scope. If you are planning on doing manufacturing, you need to be in a factory plant, right? You need to be in a facility that caters to production and or assembly, where the product changes, all right? If you are in retail, you need to show a lease agreement that has the designation retail. If you are trading and you want to have your own warehousing facility, you need to have your address then at that warehousing facility, okay? It has to match. No company can be registered in a residential space. It's illegal, okay? So as part of your research and business plan, it is really important to understand the following considerations when registering your address in China. Take advice from real estate agents, take advice from your lawyers, take advice from your advisors, all right? A lease agreement does have to be signed when you want to incorporate your company in China. The lease agreement must be submitted together with additional documentation from your landlord. So it is a vicious cycle. You can't register your company until you have your lease agreement on hand. You can't move into that property until you have your business license. Very tricky situation to be in, but that's how it is. Virtual office addresses are 100% illegal in China and should be avoided, meaning there is no such thing as a PO box. You need to rent a space that has 4 walls and a door. Okay? Why is this? So, however, having said that, it doesn't mean that there are not service providers out there who don't offer virtual office addresses. Okay? But you need to be aware of the following. Number one, if you are setting up a company in China and you're planning on not having any staff whatsoever, don't set up a company in China. Do that from abroad. Why? Because every single company in China should be operational. And when it comes to the audit at the end of the year, or if you have any surprise government visits to your location, they will want to see that you are actually operational. Okay? Now, the question then comes up from most of my clients saying, well, we have to incorporate the company, and then it's going to take time to build up the business. We don't want to incur payroll until the point that there's certain volume of business. So what can we do in this interim period, which may be from 6 months to 1 year? So the first year of your startup phase. My answer to that is go into a business center, rent a space there, like a 1-person workstation, so that you actually have an office with 4 walls. Okay? But you're cutting your costs low. All right? Now, the key aspect to all of this is that, and another aspect that I just want to mention as well is that you will also get some service providers recommending to you saying, oh, this zone is offering you preferential treatments, you should be located there. You don't get anything written down on paper, and then you decide to locate there, even though you know that's not where you want your operational office to be, but you want to take advantage of the preferential treatments. Big mistake. You will get site visits, whether it be from the COC, whether it be most likely from the tax bureau, whether it be from the labor bureau. Because on all of your business licenses and certificates, your registered office address is indicated as that address. If you then want to register a branch office, no problem. But you need to have somebody located in that physical space. Business centers are the best option because you have a receptionist that's part of the service. So it always seems like somebody is there. Okay? But be aware that you will have site visits and people will want to see and meet someone from the company. Try to avoid this dual location. It makes absolutely no sense. Make your registered office address your operational office. When you're incorporating your company in China, you need to sign a minimum of a 1-year lease agreement. Any agreement that is shorter than this will be denied during the registration. So don't sign an agreement today and start the application of the incorporation in December. Your service provider or lawyer will say, re-sign the agreement. Make sure it's minimum 1 year. That's what the government wants to see. All right? So minimum 1-year lease agreement. Now, if you're working with a business center, it's very easy to sign just a 1-year lease agreement. However, my recommendation to you is if you've done your business plan and you know how you're planning on expanding or growing or increasing headcount, try and already negotiate in that lease agreement your expansions. So yes, initially I need just a 1-person workstation that will encompass the first person I hire, but I think in 8 months I will have my second person. What would be the fee of the lease agreement if I have to increase to a 2-person workstation office? What happens if I have to increase to a 5-person workstation office if I'm suddenly growing so big? And try to also then calculate what is your point where you would move out, for example, from a business center into a real commercial space. Okay? This is all part of your market research. Understanding a little bit about the real estate market so you can make these types of calculations in terms of your expansion plans. But negotiate your lease agreements. If you don't want to go into a business center, you want to go into a commercial space or even a manufacturing facility or a warehousing facility from day one, try to negotiate longer term contracts. They will only benefit you, but it will also benefit your budget because you won't get any surprises along the way. You will know what is your rent for that 5-year period. And that will guide you during your startup phase. For those that haven't attended the previous webinars, for me, a startup phase will last anywhere between 3 and 5 years. And when you want to create your budget projections, you want to know how much you're going to be spending for those years. We had a situation myself. I was in a business center. This was in 2006, really when there was the real estate boom. And I got from one day to the next a notice that the rent would be increased by 50%. And that was my point where I started investigating moving out of a business center and going into my own office space, which actually ended up being much cheaper. This is what happens when you go into high profile, high image locations in big cities like Shanghai or Beijing. You know, rental increases can occur like that. But if you negotiate longer terms, they can't do anything with it. They've negotiated, and that will be a breach of contract. So be aware of this. Sign at least 1-year contracts. Try to negotiate longer or negotiate the terms so that you are aware of how to create your budget. As I mentioned, the type of property is of utmost importance as it indicates your entity choice and your business scope. If in your business scope you're saying that you're manufacturing, you want to be in a factory space. If you're a trading company, you have a choice of being in a commercial space or if you want to be in a warehousing facility. That's part of your business plan. Retail, you need to be in a retail facility. And one of the key aspects is, as I mentioned, the lease agreement needs to be shown. So if you add retail, but retail is phase 2 of your expansion, then in phase 1, your business scope will not have retail. And in phase 2, once retail is starting, you will update your business scope, add retail, show the retail lease agreement. Okay? It's very, very important to show this. One of the documents that needs to be provided by your landlord is the ownership certificate of the property. And inside the ownership certificate, there is a section which highlights how this property is designated, what form it has. So the government will check this. Please remember, and this is extremely key aspect as well, Unlike other jurisdictions like Hong Kong, where you can register 100 companies or 1,000 companies in one registered office address location, in China, one company can be registered in one registered office space. So it is imperative that when you talk to your real estate agent, or you talk to the business center directly, or you talk to the landlord, you make sure that the previous tenant is still not registered in that space. I have had clients wait for the landlord to remove the previous tenant from the real estate bureau's registration list, which can take up to a month. Okay? So when you're finding locations, check, I mean, this is again a big tip for you. Check with your real estate company. Nobody's registered in this space, right? Or if someone has just moved out, how long is it going to take that your name can then be registered in that space? All right? You don't want to have to wait, because this prevents you from registering your company. These are things that delay your company registration process. Now, I do just want to mention a little bit of a tip as well. So as I mentioned, virtual offices are illegal. There are service providers, however, that do offer virtual office solutions. I wouldn't recommend going that route. However, there are business centers that offer spaces for registration purposes only. So what this basically means is that you can work with a business center during the registration phase of your company. They are providing you with a 4-wall office space with a number, but somebody else is actually using that space for that interim period. And it's at a lower cost. So for the period where it takes 6 months to 9 months to incorporate, you have this cheaper option that's available to you until you want to have physically your own office and put one person there. So keep that in mind as a tip as well if you're looking to work with a business center. Another legal consideration, you are suddenly realizing that the location, i.e. the city you have chosen, is not a success for your business, and now you want to change cities. So I'll use this as a kind of an example. So you wish to move your company located in Beijing to Shanghai. You've realized Beijing was not the place that you should have gone to. And now you've started doing the market research and you realize that Shanghai is where you want to be. Unfortunately, in China, you cannot just pick up your company from Beijing and relocate it to Shanghai. Each city has its own governmental authority, and as such, moving from one city to another, it's bypassing the authority level of that government office. So there are 2 solutions available to you. The first is registering a new company in Shanghai, transferring all the assets and staff, followed by then liquidating the company in Beijing. Sounds tedious, doesn't it? But perhaps it also highlights why it's so important to do this type of market research before you locate in China. The second option, but you will incur higher cost, is keeping the company in Beijing, setting up an operational branch office in Shanghai, relocating the staff and assets, but the company in Beijing is still operational, which means in the eyes of the Beijing government, you still need to lease a space, all right? And in theory, you should have someone on your payroll. So it's just adding to your cost. If you don't even need Beijing, why keep Beijing? Just liquidate it. But I hope that this slide just clearly portrays why it's so important to choose the city that you want to be in. You just can't pick up a company and move a company in China. It does not work like that. So choose your city wisely and do your research. All right? These are all the issues that are associated with legal considerations. Now let's move on to tax considerations, which I think will even cause you more of a shock. So each city in China, I'll use Shanghai as an example. Shanghai is made up of a number of different districts. You have Huangpu District, Jing'an District, you have Minhang, you have Jiading, you have Pudong. In Pudong, you also have sub-districts. And you have to remember, when your company is incorporated, all right, in Shanghai, in that specific registered office address, your tax registration is done with that district tax bureau. So if you choose Huangpu as your district, you are registered with the Huangpu Tax Bureau. Okay? That's who you're going to be dealing with on a month-to-month basis. That is who you're going to be collaborating with to make sure you get preferential tax rates or tax considerations. That's where you have to file and declare your taxes, etc. Okay? So keep this now in mind. Tax incentives may be offered by the state or the local government. So as I mentioned, the government of certain cities, maybe even of certain districts, will be looking to attract specific industries in high-tech, environmental, R&D, and sometimes it follows the 5-year plan that's created by the Chinese government. When you're going into these cities and negotiating the terms of locating there, and you have to negotiate, get them all in writing, whether it's legal considerations or tax considerations. Get it all in writing. And, they could range from anything from a period of time where you don't pay rent all the way to getting a lower profits tax rate. All right? So make sure you investigate this. And I just want to highlight to you what one of the tax incentives is. And this is purely for high new technology enterprises, HNTE, where ultimately you are eligible for 15% profits tax rate compared to 25% anywhere in China. First of all, you have to be in an industry that is part of the high new technology enterprises. The second point is that the core IP of your business needs to be owned by this HNTE company, which means this company that is registered in China. Okay? That's really critical. What has changed since 2000 and when the new regulation came out in 2016 is that there's no longer a ratio of how many employees have to have certain levels of certificates. This was the case previously, and I can imagine in some tier 3, tier 4 cities, they may still have this requirement where a certain percentage of your employees have to hold certain diplomas and certificates in order to be recognized as a HNT company. The biggest aspect is that the research and development expense needs to be 5% of the annual revenue of the China company. So you need to also take that in mind. These are all types of the criteria that you need to fulfill in order to be able to receive the reduced 15% tax rate. Now, what's also different compared to prior to 2016 is the fact that on an annual basis, you need to do a self-assessment. If you don't do the self-assessment, then your HNTE qualifications will be immediately revoked. All right? So that's extremely important. These are the types of companies that now, under the new regulations since 2016, fall under. So as you can see, e-commerce and modern logistics is part of it. What you need to do in terms of the process is you need to incorporate your company. So you have to go through the entire incorporation process. At that point, you can then apply for the HNTE status, which basically means that there is no guarantee, even if you do fulfill it, that you will get it, because it's always subjective to what the government sees as you fulfilling that criteria. You've got to imagine the tax bureaus in China. Do they really want you to pay less tax? No. They want everyone to pay the 25%. So if you are applying for this special treatment, they're going to make your life hell in order to grant it. I can tell you this now. They will ask you a series of documents truly to prove that you fulfill all the criteria. And as I mentioned, if you don't remain compliant once you get that status, they will revoke it immediately. And really, it's for the pure and simple reason that they do want you to pay more taxes. All right? So keep all of this in mind. And this is just one of the tax incentives that exists, okay? And that can be provided in certain zones. Now, here's probably the biggest issue that arises for companies in terms of tax considerations. And it's a huge, huge halt in your business. If you want to change office space, so let's say you found out you're in Huangpu district in Shanghai, you are now ready to expand. And in fact, you want to now move from a business center location into a real office space. And you found the perfect location in Jing'an district. Okay? Which means you want to relocate from Huangpu district to Jing'an district. You are registered in Huangpu District Tax Bureau. The Huangpu Tax Bureau is not going to be happy that they're going to lose tax revenue from you. Which means you need to do a closure audit with them to make sure there is no outstanding tax liability that you owe the Huangpu Tax Bureau. This whole process of going through a closure audit with the Huangpu Tax Bureau, reopening with the Jing'an Tax Bureau, claiming again general VAT taxpayer status, can last anywhere between 3 and 4 months. Which means your business is halted for 3 to 4 months because you can't purchase VAT invoices because you're going through a closure audit from any bureau, and you can't issue then the VAT invoices to customers. It's a huge, huge issue. So not only do you need to make sure you choose the right location in China, meaning city, whether it be Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Wuhan, Wuxi, Nanjing. You also need to choose the right district in that city so that you can avoid moving from district to district. Because the worst thing that you want is that your business is halted for a certain period of time. And I can tell you now, basically, first of all, you've got to picture it like this. You've got all of China trying to achieve a certain revenue target in taxes. Then there's a competition between cities. Then there's a competition between districts. And I can tell you in Shanghai, there's a huge competitive atmosphere between the various districts in terms of garnering who has the highest revenue. All right? So please do keep all of this in mind when choosing a city, choosing a district in a city. Businesses can get halted. All right? You've got to keep that all in mind. Now, the next point, and this is a question I get asked daily. Do I need to consider having an offshore holding company for my China investment? I have a lot of trouble in answering this today. I have a lot of trouble in answering it primarily because on a global scale, every single jurisdiction out there has to be tax transparent. And there are fewer and fewer loopholes around evading taxes. In fact, the whole terminology evasion of tax has been removed. And what you're looking at is tax optimization. But because on a global scale, every single jurisdiction is required to be transparent, particularly with businesses that have subsidiaries on a global scale, it's very difficult to incorporate a holding company or an offshore holding company and use it to its advantage. Now, let me explain the difficulties. So as we all know, Hong Kong has been renowned as being the stepping stone into China, the gateway into China. Hong Kong has always been the first point of market entry into China. It's where it was the easiest to incorporate a company, easiest to set up a bank account, and from there they felt that there was a large level of protection between the beneficial owners or the ultimate shareholding companies and the Chinese investment. This is no longer the case. Basically, what the Chinese government, and this is all, I'm explaining all of this basically from the Chinese Tax Bureau's perspective, is that if you, for example, have a holding company in Hong Kong that has no substance, it has no commercial economic substance, meaning it's purely a holding. You're using a corporate service provider's registered address. There is no business running through that company. Then actually the Tax Bureau will request to see proof that there is substance in the Hong Kong company to see whether you can use the beneficial tax rates under the double taxation agreements. Of late, there have been numerous companies who have holding company status in Hong Kong who have not been able to garner the preferential tax rates for repatriating funds or even repatriating dividends, meaning they are forced then to use the normal rates that exist, paying therefore higher taxes in China. If you are looking to do indirect transfers of assets, it's the same thing. The Chinese government is going to look, Chinese Tax Bureau is going to look at the holding to see whether there is substance or not. And last but not least, they're also going to look at the place of effective management. The managers of that holding company, where are they sitting? Are they sitting in Hong Kong? Or are they sitting in China? Or are they sitting in the UK? Or are they sitting in the US? Where are they all sitting? So first they're going to look at commercial economic substance, transactions flowing through the company. And they're going to look then also at where the management is sitting. All right? So be aware of this. I think probably, though, the biggest issue that I have with places like Hong Kong, with places like Singapore, is the fact that it's still extremely easy to incorporate a company. It is a nightmare to open a bank account. The banks are all required to do very thorough know your client due diligences. And if they see that you're not planning on having staff in that company, you're not planning on having a local director in that company, meaning no management in that company, you're not planning on having an actual office space, right? You're using a corporate service provider's registered address, then they won't open the account for you. The main reason behind this, which is to some level understandable, is the fact that banks don't earn any money off of holding companies because there are no transactions running through them. But on top of that, there's a lot of tax evasion that's occurring with these holding companies as well. So they try to avoid opening them. On average now, it takes anywhere between 4 and 6 months to open an account in Hong Kong, if you're purely having this company being a holding company. If you can show a business plan that there will be economic and commercial substance, then the timeline is much, much shorter. But then you have to make that company operational. So my answer to this question, although very long-winded, do I need to consider an offshore holding company? I wouldn't use the term offshore holding. If you would like to have an intermediary company in place between your beneficial owner and the Chinese investment, then do so, but make that company operational so that you can show economic and commercial substance. Now, probably the slide I should have started off with, but these are questions, again, that I still get asked today. China sounds so complicated. So maybe that's what some of you are now thinking. My goodness me, going into the Chinese market, I've got to think just on the topic of registered office address about certain legal and tax considerations. I don't have the time to do this type of research, to find out where I want to be and which district I want to go to. Hong Kong just sounds so much easier. Why don't I just start off in Hong Kong? And the question then is Hong Kong a better option than China? So, the first thing I ask clients is, why do you want to be in China? What's the main purpose of you going into the Chinese market? Then you can kind of start analyzing, okay, is Hong Kong maybe a better alternative? But ultimately, what you need to do is create your business plan. Within your business plan, have a business model readily available that analyzes your competitors, your resources, your suppliers, your customers, your financial status, obviously the legal tax and corporate compliance requirements, and comparing them between the two locations. Now, the consensus will probably show Hong Kong is by far the easiest jurisdiction to go into compared to China from a legal perspective, tax perspective, HR perspective. But let me tell you what you cannot do with a Hong Kong company. And people don't realize this because they assume, well, Hong Kong, China, it's one country. Yes, but it's one country and two systems. Two very separate jurisdictional systems. Okay? Hong Kong, you cannot and you will not be able to hire any mainland Chinese that are residing in China. Let me rephrase that. You can't hire anybody that you want to reside in China from a Hong Kong company. A lot of people assume they can. They cannot. Okay? If you are hiring people that are residing in China, number one, if they're foreigners, they need work permits and residence visas. If they are local mainland Chinese, they need to pay social insurances and taxes locally in mainland China. Okay? Which means they're not going to be getting mandatory provident fund in Hong Kong. How is that going to be of any use to them in China? All right? They're not going to pay Hong Kong taxes. They need to pay China taxes. They're based there. Okay? Another big aspect is if you are looking to sell in the Chinese market, your customers will require you, if you're already in the vicinity of China, meaning in Hong Kong, to issue VAT invoices. If your whole point of selling into the Chinese market is to say, I want to sell local, meaning you want to sell in renminbi and you want to issue a VAT invoice, you can only do that from a mainland Chinese company. You cannot do that from a Hong Kong company. All right? And, I mean, the biggest issue that I think I have with some clients is the fact that they say Hong Kong will be used as our marketing tool to get into the Chinese market. How can it be your marketing tool? WeChat is not used in Hong Kong as much as it is used in China. Tmall and Taobao, they have global online platforms that are headquartered out of Hong Kong. But you're not going onto the local platforms, which is where all the consumers are. So, you know, you've got to be aware of this. On top of all of that, you've also got to understand that although, you know, Shanghai and Hong Kong in terms of standard of living, Hong Kong is still a lot higher. Shanghai is catching up. So, you know, you're spending just as much in both locations. You may as well just go into Shanghai directly. So where do I see Hong Kong going? Basically, and this is what I tell a lot of my clients that have really nice and have actually made long-term goals and visions for their organization. If you're planning on doing business in China, go into China. Go into mainland China. Be there on the ground in the territory to build your business. Hong Kong is an amazing jurisdiction if you're looking to go into any other Asian country except China. You wanted to expand to Japan. You want to expand into Southeast Asia. You want to expand to Taiwan. You want to expand to Korea. Even expand all the way out to Australia, New Zealand. Hong Kong offers you that advantage. So if you're looking initially as your stepping stone to go into the Chinese market, then go into the Chinese market. If your long-term vision is APAC, the Asia Pacific region, have Hong Kong become your headquarter for APAC. You can then include China into that organization structure, but China should be for China, Hong Kong for the rest of Asia. That's where I see business models being created now. So I always end every webinar with a summary of keywords for choosing your registered office address. It is probably almost every real estate agent's mantra to say location, location, location. And probably after this webinar, you understand why they say it 3 times, why they emphasize it 3 times. Choosing a location for any new business, especially in such a large country like China, is really one of the most important decisions any company will have to face when going into the market. The location of your business, it can affect many different aspects. It can affect how you operate, it can affect your sales, it can affect talent acquisition and retainment, it can affect logistical situations, it can affect legal and tax considerations. So ultimately, you don't want to rush in making your decision. You want to do a proper research. Meet with real estate agents locally in China. You have all the big firms like JLL, you've got Knight Frank, CBRE, you've got all of these big firms. You also have much smaller ones that are also Western owned. Many of these real estate agents offer the service of location studies, where they will tell you what would be the best location and why, all the way from pricing, utility fees, location, customers. They'll do that type of location study for you. And obviously, when you found your location, please then tell legal professionals or corporate service providers or whoever is your advisor about it, so they can tell you the consequences if you are to relocate. Okay? What would happen? This is all a part of your business plan and your budget, where I mentioned you should be thinking about foreseeing any economic consequences or obstacles that might occur to you. A lot of people think, oh, it's Chinese regulations and all of that. Yes, but what happens if you just want to move simply your office? This will affect your business plan. It will affect your budget. And then there will be much more difficulty surrounded in terms of halting your business because of the local and district tax bureaus. So that's the end of today's presentation. Let me just look at the time. I've gone over again. I really apologize. Okay, we'll go 5 minutes into the questions. And as I mentioned earlier, if you guys have any very specific questions, stay on the line. I will answer you directly. So the first question that is asked is, what are the best places where I can open a fulfillment center? E-commerce is probably, the hottest topic right now in China because of the volume of business that's running online. And this is the majority of companies that are now going into China. They want to be able to sell online. From my perspective, the new free trade zones that I had highlighted earlier, their primary benefit is to e-commerce companies and to creating fulfillment centers. So the first location I would tell any e-commerce company to investigate is these new free trade zones in terms of customs benefits. Actually, it's really more around the customs benefits and the access to the customs bureaus, which I think are extremely important when you're trying to create a fulfillment center. So definitely for e-commerce fulfillment centers, I would go more in the direction of these new free trade zones. The next question is, do we need an actual office presence in China in order to do business there, or do we just need to create contacts? Well, I think any business or any company that is looking to go into China will probably start off by not having an entity or structure there. They'll try and do everything remotely. Obviously, the trend is, as your business grows in that market, you need to have a physical establishment there. So I think for me, the turning point where I say to companies, at what point should we have an establishment, would be the point where you need to physically hire someone on the ground. For me, that would be the point where I say, if you want to hire someone on the ground, the only way to do it is to have a physical entity, okay, and be physically operational in that market. What are the main cities best for setting up a wholly owned foreign enterprise? A wholly foreign owned enterprise, first of all, is a LLC. It's a limited liability company whereby the shareholder is a foreign investor. There is no best location. I will then put the question to you. Have you done your market research to know where your competitors are located, where your customers are located? Do you need to be near a port? Do you not need to be a port? What is the image? all the points that I highlighted on the first slide of today's presentation will guide you to finding the best location for your foreign investment. I'm just going to look at some of the questions that have come in. So one of the questions that's come in is actually a very good one about these free trade zones and what the preferential policies are for these free trade zones. Are they blanket policies that apply to all companies? So the policies in the free trade zones. So first of all, they orientate around the negative list. There are two negative lists. I'm sure maybe you weren't aware of that. There is a negative list for the free trade zones, and there is a negative list that is outside for the free trade zones. The negative lists for the free trade zones are the most liberal, meaning that companies that are permitted to set up 100% foreign invested will be in the free trade zone, and they may not be in mainland China, meaning outside of the free trade zone. So definitely the first thing that you want to do is investigate both negative lists to see where you'll be able to set up. So I'll give you an example with the recruitment sector. With the recruitment sector, if you want to 100% own your recruitment company, you can do that in the free trade zone. There are certain specific criteria that have to be fulfilled. For example, the shareholding company needs to have had a recruitment license for at least 3 years in order to then incorporate in the free trade zone. A 100% owned recruitment company outside of the free trade zone is not permitted. You need to have a joint venture structure where the Chinese party holds 51%. So this is where it's important then to look at both of the negative lists. Then it comes down to customs policies. Basically, working inside a free trade zone, the customs operations are much more efficient, meaning that you can get your goods released, I believe, within 40, if not less than 72 hours. So within 3 days, you can get your documents released. You can do one customs declaration for numerous shipments. So you don't have to do one application per shipment. You can do one application for numerous shipments that are coming in at roughly the same time. These are all part of the self-assessment processes. You don't have to pay VAT and customs duty upon arriving. It would only be once they go into mainland China where that would occur. Then you have financial policies where the renminbi is immediately convertible in the free trade zones, not outside of the free trade zone. So kind of for every kind of aspect and division, financial, customs, tax, there is no preferential treatment for profits tax or any type of VAT or whatnot. That's unified throughout China. Some people think there is. It is, but it's not, unless you fall under, for example, the HNTE that I highlighted earlier. So you have to kind of look at all of these aspects and compare them between being in the free trade zones and being out of the free trade zones. But really, your first step should be with a negative list. Most of the time, if you work with a lawyer or you work with an advisor and you tell them the industry and sector that you're wanting to go into, they will already tell you from the get-go, the free trade zone is a good place to be, the free trade zone is not a good place to be. All right, I'm going to leave the questions there because we're almost 10 minutes out. For those that I didn't answer just now, please stay on the line and I will answer you. If you can't go, then I will be emailing you my answers. As I mentioned, I am offering free consultations, so don't hesitate to reach out to me at info@woodburnglobal.com or Kristina with a K at woodburnglobal.com. Last but not least, all of our marketing initiatives currently are free and complimentary. We have a series of weekly publications that are on our website. Plus we have these free webinars, both live and recordings that are also available on our website. If you want to subscribe to knowing what's happening with us, then please subscribe to our newsletter. And you can do that very easily on our homepage. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how to employ talent, how to find talent, and how to structure employment contracts and salaries. So please join us for tomorrow's session if you haven't registered yet. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Talk to you soon. Have a great day, and bye.